Currently, the 45th president of the United States, Donald Trump, is facing up to 75 years hard prison time for what, might you ask? Well, basically, they're sentencing him for what? Having documents in Mar-a-Lago. Now, I had to talk about this, even though a lot of people have already covered it. But the fact is that this is a regime altering, completely historically defiant procedure that is basically been embarked upon by the liberal establishment, which frankly is astonishing to watch. And I wouldn't have imagined this happening 5 years ago, but here we are today, looking at a president who apparently was such a threat to the system that they're threatening to lock him up for 3/4 of a century when the guy is already 3/4 of a century old, mind you. And so now we're looking at a situation where he's being charged for something that dozens of other politicians, and namely Mike Pence, Joe Biden himself, are guilty of doing the same thing. That crime being basically the logistics around having certain classified documents in Mar-a-Lago. Now, the question is, if Joe Biden, for instance, had all these sort of things, the same thing as Donald Trump, in his house, in the garage, where the Corvette was, where the convertible was, how come Joe Biden's not in jail and Trump is going to be, hypothetically? Well, the question is, who is in power? You know, as a heuristic, I've learned this. You can know who controls you by who you can criticize. On YouTube, we have to censor ourselves to an extent because we cannot fully go mask off in respect to many different things, namely who's controlling things, in part because of, again, the censors at B. For a while, you couldn't deny the results of the last election. Why? Well, because of the fact that we were censored. Why is that censorship important? Because we can see the co-aligning stars, where we can look into the sky and say, we can correlate not being able to deny the election results with the January 6th stuff. And you could basically have a censored neuter right wing where we don't know what to do, where we're at a primary where we have a candidate like Donald Trump, who's the incumbent nominee over here, leading by 40 points in the polls in a very disadvantageous field in society where he's already deplatformed off of many things. And this guy is going to be the guy who catches all the slings and the arrows, and he's going to be the guy who is imprisoned theoretically for 75 years over stuff that everybody else has done. Now, one of the issues with what I see is just completely prejudicial against Donald Trump, namely, is that we see every other politician guilty of similar or worse things than Donald Trump. What I find pernicious about this whole thing is that, of course, everybody is also dirty. We're all in the mud. And we're going to just select certain politicians to be the bad ones, when in reality, everybody's guilty. And they'll gaslight you, and they'll think Donald Trump is one of the most corrupt presidents. Meanwhile, this is the type of person who would support Hillary Clinton. These are the type of people that would vote for Joe Biden, when these people are guilty of much graver crimes. And moreover, it seems to me as if this gaslighting is working on a lot of people. A lot of people are saying, well, he's the president, he's above the law, but he did commit a crime. Personally, I don't even think he did anything wrong. As far as I know, he didn't intentionally steal classified documents and then do what exactly with them. I don't think he had a malintent there. And moreover, he had them in a safe. He had them relatively secured, as compared to Joe Biden or Mike Pence, who just had them around desks and didn't really care where they were. And part of the reason why I'm kind of sussed out by this is that this sort of like procedural thing is really just like a white people thing. And this is a take that I uniquely have, which is that these like first world countries have these like really inane sort of things, these sort of things that are just procedural technicalities, like, oh, you didn't file your taxes the right way, now you're going to jail, or you didn't declassify this, so now you're going to jail. This sort of thing, it's like a white people kind of like a technicality. I really don't care for it. I don't think Donald Trump did anything wrong in respect to that. And moreover, it seems to me as if the truth points to the fact that Donald Trump didn't have a malicious intent with this. I'll elaborate on that point. So on that point, Donald Trump could have sold these secrets. If these were secrets at all worth containing in the government's purview and not anybody else's purview, then he would have sold the secrets, right? Like if he's this like greedy bankrupt billionaire or whatever, why wouldn't he just sell these secrets to Russia? He didn't. There's no proof of that. Why is that the case? Because probably the documents either had nothing in them that's important, therefore don't charge him on that because there's nothing there, or he had stuff that was sensitive information, but he didn't share it. So what's really the consequential problem? And then somebody like Destiny, who's like the prototypical Bill Maher's like moderate liberal, would say, well, no, this is really bad because on principle, he could have done something bad with it. Well, if he didn't do anything wrong with it, then what's the charge exactly? Okay. And, you might say, well, he's still getting charged on not selling secrets to Russia or China, but more so just keeping the secrets. Well, if that's the case, then why is it 75 years? How come he could have literally have abused a girl? He could have beat the hell out of somebody and he would have gotten less time in jail than 75 years. If he's sentenced to 75, which is what the government's pushing, which is what the Biden admin is pushing, how come he's a worse person than somebody who's serving 20 years for aggravated assault? How is that even a balanced thing? Again, he didn't sell these secrets. And again, he's the one person who would benefit the most if he's going to be persecuted from the government. Why not pull an Assange? Why not pull a Snowden and just leak everything on the internet? He chose not to, assuming there was anything to hide there. Because again, he's of a moral character that is not to be impeached by these liberal establishmentarians. And now we're looking at a society where we're being deferential to what the government says at least half of the population is, and that's way too high of a population of people that are really agreeing with the consensus from the media. The media is obviously rigged, it's obviously controlled by a bunch of midwit 110 IQ sophists that don't really know much. And now speaking of like mid IQ sophists, Destiny is somebody that I watch occasionally just to see what the modern mainstream left is thinking in the millennial generation. And what you'll find now is that the guy is shilling, and in the thumbnail for one of his videos, he says that these are shockingly bad parts of like the indictment. So shockingly, the verbiage. Pay attention to the words he uses, or whatever the editor chose for that video. These are shockingly bad. Like even he, as a liberal who hates Donald Trump for no good reason, is all of a sudden going to say this is shockingly bad. Like I didn't know it was this bad. Think about it that way. Also, think of where the bias for these people are. They have an already ingrown reason to hate Donald Trump and to reach a conclusion that makes them look guilty. Whereas, again, I have a bias too, but I'm going to be upfront about it and say, well, you know what? I'm pretty sure he's not guilty, and not even for nothing. Like, even if I didn't read the case, I would assume he's innocent just because he's been innocent for a while. Now, think about it, and I've heard from other people that are in my same vein on the internet that, what other billionaire New York real estate developer is more clean than Donald Trump? If they've been looking for 7 to 8 years, just trying to comb through his record to see what inequities he's committed in his whole life of 76 years, they find what exactly? Some IRS loopholes. He pays less in taxes, but like in a legal manner that's like barely, exploiting a loophole or two. Is that really something that we ought to impeach him over? And then like this whole case with like E. Jean Carroll, like did he abuse this woman? And then it turns out that she was probably just lying, and that case gets thrown out. And then there's like a myriad of other accusations against him, sexually speaking. And then what, those don't really amount to anything. And again, they're sentencing him on smaller stuff. I personally think that if Donald Trump abused a girl, that's worse than whatever he did with this like technicality over classified documents. And yet still he's being persecuted over this and not the girl stuff, because the girl stuff is just that much more fake. So to me, it seems as if he's pretty clean, all things considered. Moreover, when you look at the big picture of things, you have to look at who benefits from Donald Trump going to prison. And it's going to be these Ron DeSantis types. These Ron DeSantis people are going to be salivating at the mouth, frothing at the mouth like a bunch of rabies-infested dogs, because now they're looking at a situation where you have the guy who was in front by like 40 points all of a sudden going to jail, theoretically, worst case scenario. And now you have an open field where either Donald Trump can legally not even run for president, or even if he does win the presidency somehow, he's going to be in the confines of a jail cell. So that's going to be a whole rigmarole that's going to be really complicated to really legislate. But the point being is that, let's say for whatever reason Donald Trump is not in the picture, now all of a sudden DeSantis has a plurality of the vote, and now all of a sudden these people like Mike Pence, these people like Nikki Haley now have a shot in hell. And you might think, well, you must support one of these candidates. But if you're on Twitter and you're hedging your bets and you're saying, you know what, I'm going to back DeSantis if Trump goes to prison, you're part of the problem. There has to be some sort of solidarity where we said, you know what, it's not fair if they take out a Republican politician for no good reason. There has to be some sort of sense of solidarity. And so I'm calling for anybody who's not supporting Donald Trump in the primary, who is a conservative, to say, you know what, we ought to back him for now. Because again, if they take down Trump because he's going to beat Biden, which is just evident in my opinion, then, they're probably going to target DeSantis. They're probably going to target other Republicans that are poised to win the election because they're just that corrupt, because they're that dirty and insecure in their own viability as candidates in the general election. And again, even if Ron DeSantis beats Joe Biden, that just shows that he's controlled opposition, because they could easily do the same thing to Ron DeSantis as they're doing to Donald Trump. Part of the reason why Donald Trump has been alive still, not assassinated, not in prison so far, is because of his wealth, which no other candidate has, or two, the fact that he's so charismatic and he has this cult fan base, so to speak. These other candidates don't have that. They're really screwed. So if they want to rely on compromising with the left and really just becoming another term of Bush minus the social conservatism, which actually made him a good president, then you're inevitably just becoming controlled opposition. Is America really going to be fixed by a guy who's controlled opposition, who's funded by the Heritage Foundation, and funded by Israel, funded by the NATO countries, funded by these foreign interests? You think somebody like Ron DeSantis will fix things, drain the swamp? I really doubt it, because again, if they're willing to say, you know what, Donald Trump, you're a threat to the establishment, we're going to disenfranchise you right now. If they're going to do that to somebody who's actually a threat, and somehow Ron DeSantis slides, is that really showing him as to be like this like foreign threat? In a nominal esoteric sense. The fact is that he's not, and so you have to keep this in mind. So who's going to be the real person who's going to threaten the system? And there might be some nihilistic people in the comments saying, well, Donald Trump didn't get the job done. He had 4 years. He didn't drain the swamp. Well, guess what? Whatever crappy job you think he did was clearly enough of a threat for people to lock him up, or at least try to, in a response. So it's not getting any more threatening to the establishment than Donald Trump, obviously. Obviously. So the same thing from 2016 applies to this election 8 years later almost, where you're saying, you know what, this guy is not that competent, at least like seemingly to the suburbs. He's not the most appealing, not the most congenital, not the most, rhetorically just soft. But the point is that he's still the biggest threat. He was in 2016. He remains to be in 2023 so far. The reason being is because, of course, the guy is just establishing his presence as a man. He's saying, well, you know what? I'm going to hold it down, and he's not backing down. And his platform continues to be the furthest right wing, in my opinion, the most solidified. And again, he has this huge plan, for instance, to completely clean the slate in regards to the bureaucracy, hiring new people, draining the swamp actually for real this time, with hindsight and revenge on his mind. And so I personally think that Donald Trump, if he were to be elected, would actually do a lot more than in the first term, for starters. And that's proven by the fact that they're trying to lock him up. And it's one of these tragic things in American history where you might think, oh, well, they're going to stop at this. There's no way they're going to arrest DeSantis. What makes you think they're going to stop at that? Okay. And the worst thing that people can do as Republicans is say, well, we're going to back down. We're going to throw Trump into the shark infested waters, have them eat him up. He's old anyway. And then what? Roll around with some like 40-year-old guy who doesn't know where he is, a guy who's completely out of his depth when it comes to political charming, when it comes to charisma, when it comes to monologuing, like even somebody as young as me. And so you're talking about someone who's not adept at being president, could never fathom it. In fact, was a mediocre congressman at best. And what you know for a fact is that Donald Trump is going to be the most efficient president that we've seen in a while, because he knows what he's doing now. And you can't really say that of the other candidates because they're not incumbents. And so just to let you guys know, this is one of the biggest problems I've seen so far this year is the Donald Trump indictment. And hopefully he can escape with his life politically and, run for nomination. I will support him. And you know what? If he gets in jail, I'm still going to write him in, probably, because I just, if Ron DeSantis wins the nomination because Trump is in prison, he's controlled opposition. It's simple as that. The reason why they locked up Donald Trump is because they view him as the guy who's going to beat Joe Biden. If they thought Joe Biden would easily beat Donald Trump, like somebody like Destiny would make you believe, you think CNN, who says like, oh, Joe Biden's going to deck Donald Trump, he'll destroy him a second time. If you really think so, then why not let Donald Trump run as the controlled opposition candidate and have Joe Biden win in a landslide? You won't, CNN. You won't, judicial leftists. You won't, establishment media. Why? Because you know that Donald Trump will win. Deep down, the economy sucks. The social issues are horrible. Your candidate is garbage. And so far, Donald Trump would win the election against Joe Biden in 2024. And that's what I think. That's what the smart people think. That's what the liberals think. And that's why they arrested your boy. Now, will he be fully put in prison? I really hope not. So I'll just leave you guys with that. So comment down below what you thought. Thank you.